Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen and welcome back to my channel. I have a few things I want to share with you today in my card project, starting with how to use this fabulous orange blossom stencil and die cut set. Second, we're going to work on embracing our white space on our card. And third, we are going to show you the magic of a white gel pen. Here's a look at this orange blossom stencil and die cut set. You can purchase them separately, but I love this as a set. One stencil, and it has these branches, some individual leaves, flowers, and then also it has some circles on there, which are going to be my oranges. So I'm starting off by die cutting out a few of these pieces, starting with a branch, maybe a couple leaves, and the flower. And I also later on die cut out a circle for my orange. I found this to be a lot easier to die cut my pieces out first and then add my ink. I will be using the stick and stamp mat from Brutus Monroe to hold my pieces down. It is a sticky surface, kind of like what you would have if you had a Cricut mat or a silhouette mat. So it's a small sticky surface. I placed my die cut pieces on here, and I'm going to hold this down on my glass surface just with some low tack tape so that mat doesn't slide around. Then I'm going to take that stencil and I'm going to line up the branches. And this is going to create just that perfect white border around the edge. I have the branch and then an individual leaf on there because I'm going to just do my greens for right now and work on these in kind of their color groups. I took a Post-it and just masked off at the bottom that was hanging out from my branch so I don't get any excess ink on that. And then I'm going to blend on celery ink. So it's a really light green, just kind of as my base color. And then I'm going to bring in Pearfection, which is a darker green. And I'm using a mini blending brush to add that darker color to just one side of my branch. Then after I have just that one side blended on, I'm going to remove that Post-it note and I'm going to peel up the stencil. And this is fairly easy to pick up. The sticky mat is also holding my stencil in place, so no extra adhesive or tape needed. So now I can line up my stem and I'm going to once again mask off areas that I don't want to get any excess ink on. And I'm going to bring in that Perfection again and just lightly ink blend on that stem. I'm going to peel my stencil up and then I'm going to shift this over to that leaf that's off on the side, find the one that matches the size that I die cut out, and once again add that really light layer of ink, which is the celery ink, using the blending brush, and then come in with that darker ink Perfection just on one side to add a little dimension to these images. Now to remove your die cut pieces from this sticky mat, first I need to just lift up that tape. I'm going to save that for later so that I can pick my mat up. And what I have seen people do is they kind of fold their mat or bend it a little bit in half so that the pieces will pop up. Now for smaller die cut pieces, I found this to be a little hard. I almost kind of creased my paper a little bit. So if you have a flat spatula or some sort of palette knife like that, I would suggest trying that because I don't want to bend or you don't want to bend your die cut pieces. Off screen, I cleaned off my stencil just with a towel and some water. And now I have the flower piece on here and I'm going to line that up with the stencil. Just make sure it is lined up correctly so I have that nice white edge around the die cut piece. And I'm lightly blending on Guava. You can see I tapped a lot of that ink off on the side and just went in really, really light handed. And then I added ink kind of to the tip of my blending brush so that I could tilt my blending brush and just get the very center as a dark, dark pink. Then I brought in Citrine. There is a stencil piece that does the circle of your flower or the center of your flower. So I did that with the yellow, and then I could peel that up as well. My last piece is going to be the orange. So once again, I had cleaned off my stencil just with some water and a rag, and I'm bringing in Peachy ink, which is a very light orange. And then I'm going to bring in Mandarin and just go around one edge with that darker shade. Once again, just kind of adding a little bit of dimension to make this not look such like a flat image. Now, also on this stencil are some little itty bitty dots. So I am placing that over the lighter side of my orange and I'm going to add that Mandarin color right over the top. After I peel up my orange, I'm going to show you how I clean off the sticky mat. So you don't want to scrub the sticky mat to get the ink off. All you need to do is spray it with some water and I just take a paper towel and just lightly brush over it. If you scrub it, you're going to scrub off some of the sticky, which I accidentally did one time. Not a lot, but you don't want to push too hard when you're scrubbing. Now I'm figuring out the placement of my items, and I'm going to be stamping a sentiment from the Arched Borders stamp set. I really loved this scripty sending you, and then there's a separate word of hugs, but you could combine it with a few other sentiments that are on there. I just really liked hugs. So once I knew about what I wanted to do or where everything was going to be, I'm bringing in my blending brush that had that peachy ink on it and just lightly adding some color behind where my images are going to be. I'll take this panel over to my Misti stamping tool and I'm lining up my sentiment so it's going to have the sending you hugs, and I'm trying very careful to make sure that that is all lined up straight because hugs is a separate stamp. Once I pick that up at the door of the Misti, I'm going to stamp this in the Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, just being really gentle when I push down because I don't want to squish the letters and distort them. It is such a beautiful font. I want to make sure that I'm keeping that distinction of the fonts. I was going to leave this as a full panel, but I decided to trim this down since I did kind of get everything snug in the middle. So I am using a Waffle Flowers A2 layering die, and I'm lining that up over the area that is going to have my die cuts and my sentiment. I'm holding that down with a low tack tape and die cutting that out. Now I also have a piece of double-sided foam so it has adhesive on both sides that I trimmed down to fit this panel, which is about 3¼ by 4½. This is going to add dimension to the front of my card. Now I'm removing the backing from that foam and I'm adding this to a card panel that is 4¼ by 5½. And this is where I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the video about embracing white space. I really wanted to add dimension, and even though I could have really gone crazy with creating a background with those branches and leaves and the oranges, I just really fell in love with this simplicity. So there's very little really going on as far as images. Just a simple branch, a blossom, and the orange on there with the sentiment. And this is just really me embracing white space and not having to go all out on a card. And plus, these are so easy to create that I can make a bunch of these with a variety of sentiments. Now, when I had laid all those out on the front of my card, there was a little bit of sticky stuff from the mat, so they kind of held together on their own. And I just took a little bit of glue and glued little pieces together so that I could keep that cluster together and then add some foam behind it so I can pop this up on the front of the card. Now, since there isn't much going on with this, I thought this left a little bit of room to embellish or add some detail. So I'm bringing in these clear quartz solid sequins from GIna Designs and just adding them with some liquid glue and my pickup tool. And then as I was looking at it, I thought it needed just a little bit more. And this is where a white gel pen comes in handy. I've been reaching for this a lot, whether it's adding detail to my images or even a background by just adding white dots. So if you don't have one, I highly recommend one because they are very affordable and just really easy to add highlights to your images. Here, I'm just adding that highlight, which is a line and two dots after it to the darkest areas of the leaves and also the orange. And then I'm going to add lines to my flower petals, and I'm going to add a bunch of little dots to the center of the flower. Now, also, since this is a stencil that we created these images from, it's giving it an almost no line look, which makes it very relaxing to me to look at this card. So this, I think, would also make a great sympathy card if you struggle with sympathy cards. Just leaving a lot of that white space, having a little bit of color in the background, and then simplicity of the design just makes it a very calming card to me. So that finishes up my card project for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I will have all of the supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. Here are a few other videos I think you might enjoy.